Alrighty, well, hello everybody. I'm Chris Carberry, CEO of Explore Mars, and welcome to our Humans to Mars webinar series. Today's panel is called The Artemis Generation, How Young Professionals Are Building the Path to the Red Planet. But before I introduce our panel and Ron Sparkman, who will be introducing our panel, just a few short announcements. First off, there will be no webinar and no drinks with Explore Mars next week. We're taking a week off. But then we'll be coming back with some really impressive programming. So we will be announcing upcoming panels next week. But I think you'll really like what's coming up, over the next 3 to 4 weeks. I also like to each week thank our sponsors for the Humans to Mars Summit, since this webinar series is part of that series. So thank you to our sponsors, including Aerojet Rocketdyne, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, ULA, Paragon, MDA, the National Institute of Aerospace, the Science and Entertainment Exchange, and many others. So we are acknowledging each week. Also, if you enjoy these webinars, I hope you'll be willing to support us. Thank you for everybody who already has. But if you enjoy it, it's not free, so anything you can give is very helpful for us to be able to run these programs. Or if you're interested in sponsoring one of these webinars or the entire series, please contact us at info@ExploreMars.org. So I think it's now time to move on to our session and to introduce our panelists, Ron Sparkman. Ron?
How's it going, everybody? We're really glad to have everyone on today, and that's for a particular reason. We were all watching yesterday, and we can't wait to watch again on Saturday for everything that's going to be going on with the Artemis launches. I know Artemis in particular is probably really excited about them. One of the big things that we have is that the young professionals are the ones that are with their hands in the dirt, really working on this and leading the way in so many different ways. And the people that are on the call and today in particular have not just work in the industry, but they also take time to try and foster the relationships with what they do. With John Conafay from Spaceflight, he also worked with SEDS. With Karina at AIA, she also worked for does projects with SGAC, and Becki Yukman, who works at Space Foundation, is also a part of NewGen and trying to get those things out there. So it's very important to highlight these things. So we really appreciate everybody joining us. And so now I'm going to get it over to our moderator for today's conversation, John Conafay.
Thank you so much, Ron and Chris, for having us. Hello, space nerds, and welcome to the Artemis Generation. I am very, very excited to be on with Becki Yukman of the Space Foundation. I want to get into how your role as a senior data analyst actually enables a lot of what the space industry does here soon. And Karina Perez, Manager of Strategic Initiatives at AIA. Am I mistaken in thinking you're a policy wonk, Karina?
You know what? A little bit, because this role brings in a little bit of everything. It's like, how do you get the policy, and how do you get the pop culture and other stuff into it? It's a mixture of stuff.
Actually, why don't you kick us off by telling us a little bit about what you do on day-to-day basis, how you got to AIA, how you found space, and then we'll turn it over to Becki.
Yeah, so I think how I found space was I've always loved it. I've always loved pop culture and sci-fi, and that's kind of how I got my love for space. But it wasn't until I listened to Lori Garver, the former deputy administrator of NASA, talking about her role. Yeah, she's an awesome lady. Talking about her role in from a political science background and how you can influence the industry through that. And I said, how do I do what you do? What are you doing? And she literally said, get the word space on your resume. So I started interning, and eventually I found AIA in my last year of college. I interned with them, and then I stayed with them, mostly taking the industry and translating it into words that others can understand, translating it into terms that the general public can understand, and bringing them into our industry and letting them know, look at how cool we are. Yes, we look nerdy, but we're cool. We do all these fun stuff, and everything you use comes from space, even your phone.
Yep, absolutely. And I want to get back to what kind of seems like an impenetrable industry from the outside, especially when you want to try to get in and work in it and be highly involved. So I'd love to get back to that. But Becki, same questions posed to you. What do you do on a daily basis? How do you get into space?
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey to space was a little bit backwards. I actually used to say I didn't like space because I couldn't conceive of it. Like, it was just so many leagues of magnitude outside of like my ability to do math about or anything like that, because that's what I was really into. And so I actually got a computer science major, ended up getting a space job, and then realized about 6 months in, oh my gosh, this is a career. This like matters. This isn't just like a way to make money. Like, I could do this for my life. So I started at Lockheed Martin, and then I actually transitioned to the Space Foundation, where I've just been doing data for about 3 years now. So I publish something with my team called the Space Report every quarter now that basically dives into everything you could kind of imagine in terms of space data. So we start with like infrastructure. We do features on, the launch log of the previous year and the sort of payloads that went up in the previous year, the spaceports and what sort of activities they conducted, and then do all sorts of things. Right now in, my day-to-day job, I'm actually digging into the space economy from 2019 all around the world. So lots of foreign ministries of finance. Do a lot of things along that line. We look into workforces around the world. We look into space investment, and yeah, basically my role, I would say, in the space industry and in being a space communicator more than anything is to try and give a realistic sense of what's actually happening. Before I worked in space, I thought that NASA had no budget. We didn't do anything in space. Space was just like kind of this domain for billionaires that had no relevance to my life. And so seeing, not only the financial impact concretely, but the fact that we launched, last year we launched 103 times. And that in and of itself is a figure that most space professionals don't know. If you ask, you'll get like this wide range of how many times we launched last year. And so just having a single point of understanding how frequently we launch, what we launch, ends up being really useful, I think, for helping us have a productive conversation moving forward.
Couldn't agree more. I might be a little bit biased, as I used to work for Rice Space and Technology doing data analysis and quantitative reports like this. But I think you can't go or know where you're going if you don't know where you are. And reports and analysis like this are wildly important to actually understanding the present state of things, especially our infrastructure and everything that we actually need to get done, and the data points along the way. So that's really awesome. I'm super excited to hear that, and thank you for your work on that.
Yeah, seriously, I love the report. I know it's like nerdy, but we love that report. We love reading. So.
Oh yeah.
Glad to hear it.
Yep, absolutely, same. Very, very much so. And I definitely use it on at least a weekly basis at my current job, as knowing the history of launch is very much in the wheelhouse necessary. Karina, that I had not heard. I think we've all probably said it a million different ways, but I haven't heard it so succinctly put as get space on your resume. Just do that to get into the industry. How did you go about getting space on your resume?
Yeah, so my first entryway into space was interning for the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. But I applied with no STEM background, with no real space knowledge outside of what I really liked. But it was, I think, my cover letter where I wrote why I cared about the industry and how I saw it transform a lot of basically humanity and society, and how I wanted to be a part of that as we move forward. And I think that's what got them to take a chance on me. And it was amazing getting to know the people, and working with the committee was a really nice way to get to also to know the industry and get to know how the policy process goes on, behind closed doors. And it was just so much fun. And also getting to work on ISS reauthorization, which was for me, I was literally I don't want to go home. It's fine. I can stay here a little. But just get the workspace.
Yeah. That's incredible, and I am absolutely going to try to co-op that in the with my work with SEDS and SGAC and everything. That's excellent, and I would expect no less from somebody such as Lori Garver, who, I mean, has a pretty big event coming up this weekend. Unfortunately, it wasn't able to go off yesterday, but we're sending humans to space from U.S. soil on the first crewed mission in 9 years. Again, from U.S. soil, the first new vehicle for humans in 39 years is just insane to me. The fact that we've been utilizing the same vehicles, government-built vehicles, for so long. Lori Garver was absolutely instrumental in pushing that through and making that happen with such a loud, powerful, incredible voice.
I think there's a reason a lot of us call her Space Mom.
Yeah, yeah. How do you actually get to know her? Because networking is such a huge part of this industry as well.
Honestly, like, I saw her speak at Politicon. It was a political convention, just talking about the politics of space. And I raised my hand, asked the question, and then went up to talk to her. And she's so welcoming, which is also a great thing about the industry. If you talk to anyone in the industry, they're just gonna talk to you and sometimes talk your ear off because we love what we do. And she just, told me, do this. And then I followed up afterwards. Always remembered follow up. And as Lily started to become part of her unofficial Brookies, because she has the Brooke Owens Fellowship, and they also helped me so much, which later down the road I was able to also help them by partnering with Bill Nye and the Planetary Society to fundraise for them. But ultimately they were just so welcoming and they took me in, and everyone just kind of loves that about the industry, and then in turn brings it back and say, oh, what can I do to help the next gen?
Absolutely. And not just speaking about Lori Garver, but the fact that we are sending humans to space. Becki, what is this? What does this mean for you? What's going on in your mind about this? Are you more about human exploration, robotic? What are you thinking?
Well, gosh, I mean, on one hand, I think it's important that we do some sort of human space, that we make that public again. At a certain point, people stopped watching shuttle launches and things like that, and now people don't even know that we publicize launches. And I think having, like, frankly, the brand that is NASA, that is like space, is absolutely essential to people, like, continuing to support it, understanding its importance, and ultimately us getting sort of that public support, government financing that we need to keep the industry alive in a lot of ways.
Absolutely.
That said, it seems it's important that we have this ability to get to the ISS, right? I did actually, let me pull some numbers for you. I have some beautiful numbers I pulled. So, going into the space report, 18 different countries have sent astronauts to the ISS, but the only places we've ever launched out of are here, Russia, right? 59 of those, so about 44%, which is the greatest share of any nation, is are US nationals. And the trick with that, though, is that 52 of those went up in Russia. Like 52 of our 59, so 88% of them had to hitch a ride from Russia. So even, 2001, we conducted all 3 ISS launches that year. By 2008, we conducted 1, and we launched a single person in the shuttle to the ISS once. And that is the last time we have taken somebody from our soil to the ISS. And, when you look into it, it's anywhere from like 55 million is what the NASA Inspector General said, to most recently we paid $90.2 million for a seat on the Soyuz up to the ISS. And so if absolutely nothing else, it's just like unsustainable. And, if things go wrong, like the abort last fall, I believe it was in Russia, if that had really like halted their human launch capabilities, we might not have been able to continue occupying the ISS. And so having that redundancy really is crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was, I am completely blanking on his name, but from Planetary Society, their lead policy person, Casey, I believe it is, just published or just tweeted a comparison of the cost of this program to send humans to space versus historic programs over time. And I think it's an order of magnitude cheaper than it ever has been, now that we're actually going with commercially built
another thing that I think we should acknowledge is the fact that it really helps the U.S. supply chain when you do these public-private partnerships and you do all of this to help, continue talking about the Artemis generation. Doing it from U.S. soil also grows that job market for the Artemis generation, at least within the U.S. So for me, like, that is like one of the biggest things that I really liked, is the fact that you had also like two competitors and you had like this push for that supply chain. And that, I know it's nerdy, but you just get all these new people interested in working.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think supply chain is nerdy, then I am the king of all nerds when it comes to supply chain. I think it's the actual heartbeat and cardiovascular system of the space industry, and I love that people are really starting to pay attention to it. So do you think this is the logical first step, or do you think this is progress toward getting to Mars?
I think it's an inevitable first step. I mean, without redundancy in our ability to get humans to space, imagine if there was literally one way ever, to do so. There was one way to get to any particular place on Earth, and if anything happened to that, nobody was ever going to get to London again. I mean, like, that would be insane. So it's a necessary first step, but going to the ISS is like a really, given, like, when you think about where low Earth orbit is, and then where geosynchronous orbit is, and then where the moon is, and then where Mars is, like, it becomes fairly obvious that, like, having the crew capabilities and, like, the capsule working, I think, is really valuable, but we have a lot of progress to do to get to all those orders of magnitude away.
And I think also just the inspiration aspect of doing this helps to get both the public interested and support. And coming from a trade association, we also want the government to see what we're doing, and we want them to understand, like, the importance of it and how cool it is and what type of technology we'll bring back, but also inspiring those people to come and work and join us and see that it's not an old school thing. It's not, I feel like a lot of people don't even know that we have astronauts in the ISS. Sometimes people ask me, wait, we still do that? It's like, yes, we do. We still have them, and kind of doing this showcases that it's a growing and living industry that they can take a part of.
Yep.
And I think another part of that is that a lot of people have never seen, if they've seen the space industry and what that workforce looks like, they've seen, like, the picture of the Apollo 11 command room, right? Which is just like leagues of middle-aged white men. And so like the idea that, like, I, a young person of, some mixed race descent or something like that, like, that I could have a part in the space industry would be really, frankly, inconceivable if you'd never seen it. So
yeah, absolutely. And I loved seeing I think it was Leland Melvin say that yesterday, the idea of kids seeing him go up and saying, oh, I can do that too. That is a reality for me, not just middle-aged white men or white people was really profound and really phenomenal, and seeing the diversity in coverage yesterday was really inspiring and heartening. Absolutely, because it's going to take all of us. If this isn't an exclusive game by any means.
No, I always say that you can always find your space in space.
Yep,
there's
exactly.
room for everyone. You can always find a role, even from a political science background. But it did take me seeing Lori Garver to say, oh wait, I can do this.
Yeah, that's really phenomenal. So I was kind of leading earlier when I asked how you got into space and everything, because I know you're involved with the Space Generation Advisory Council, and Becki, you're involved with Space Foundation. Well, you've worked for Space Foundation, but the NewGen program, how did you all get involved with these organizations? I personally am a Students for the Exploration and Development of Space, SEDS fanatic. So how did you actually get in on these groups, and what did they kind of either helped or kind of catapulted for you?
Becki?
I'll start real quick. Oh gosh. Webcam disasters.
Yeah.
So New Generation is associated with the Space Foundation, so it was a natural leap from the work I was doing. The one thing I will say though is that my team was very focused on, the data and the number crunching and the report writing in our little kind of corner of the office. So I kind of had to seek out these opportunities to even just interact with people of my own generation. Like the Space Foundation has certainly, like, in the last 2 years, there's been a lot of hiring and things like that. But when I joined, I was the youngest person by a decade. And that was like kind of terrifying. And so I really sought out, like, we had a little team that was kind of budding, and we've expanded it to about 8 people now. And so we host a whole track through Space Symposium, and we also hold events at conferences all around the country. And for high schoolers, all sorts of things where we bring in both space professionals and young space professionals and have them kind of mentor down the chain. So that's what we focus on.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
For me, Space Gen was very similar. Space Generation Advisory Council. In the committee, most of the committee staffers, were about 20 years difference in age, and everyone who I interacted with was, again, 15 years older than me, so it was kind of hard finding people my age. And then I found the Space Generation Advisory Council, and I joined, and I first did one of their working groups and published my first space-related article, which was really fun, but also started working with them on hosting SGX, which is a conference during satellite, which John was our MC last year. Thank you for that. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for that.
But within SGX, it's a lot of fun because you get to bring industry professionals to talk to young professionals about their careers and how they got there. So it's not a sales pitch. It's more like, so this is my career. This is how I got here. You might take some tips from this or not, or you might want to talk with me after this. And so for me, doing that type of work is really helpful because I think that's what I really needed. And I think being able to help provide that is actually very, very exciting for me. And it always makes me feel really good because it's like having more people be like, join us, one of us.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. And it does, yeah, we do kind of tinge on that edge of one of us. Be a space nerd. Yeah. And you just got a shout out for SGX 2020 from Josh Ingersoll. So hey Josh,
yeah,
how's it going?
Producer was so much fun. And also just the fact that you get to have video games and space and to mix them together was,
Yeah, that's super awesome. And you had Cass Anvar for the moderator.
Yeah, right? We had Cass from the Expands be our MC this year. He was a lot of fun, and of course he loves space. So when I asked, like, hey, would you like to, MC this? It's for young professionals. He didn't even need to know more. He just said when, and
that's awesome.
Let me know.
And that's the space community. It's what I love about these organizations, whether it's Space Vision for SEDS or SGX for Space Generation, and the NewGen tracks at Space Symposium for Space Foundation. The speakers are there to actually speak to the young, future space leaders and actually help and be engaged. They're not just get off stage, leave. They're really there to help people get where they need and want to be, and it's really, I don't know, it's really phenomenal. I haven't experienced that in any other kind of industry, and I've tried a few. So.
And one thing I'll say too, it's not just in these like really curated mentorship spaces. Like the industry itself, I found is like really, everybody is here not because like this is the most lucrative thing they could be doing with their time, or the easiest thing they could be doing with their time, but because they love doing this. And so like I went to SmallSat last year. I got to chatting with somebody about a rocket model behind him. I ultimately got to go see an Antares launch just from having this conversation with some man in his 70s about the rocket model behind him.
That is so cool.
And I sent the follow-up email. That's it, Karina.
Yeah, follow up.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. It's just like that. The first and only space launch that I actually saw was OSIRIS-REx down here at the Cape, and it was because I was in Denver visiting friends, and then we went to a Space Nerd happy hour in Denver, and I met somebody and was just drinking with a few new friends that I met there, and they were talking about how excited they were to go, and then one of them was like, yeah, I can't actually go, but I have the ticket for the behind the scenes tour and all that stuff, and I was just like, so is that, he was like, oh yeah, do you want to go? I was like, yeah, that'd be excellent, please. And stuttering all over myself, and so I ended up being able to see OSIRIS-REx launch. It was just because space people are cool. So wonder what a conversation over beers will do. So I don't want to let anybody get away from this, because I think it's my favorite question to ask, because it can be a little bit controversial. And we'll get more and more controversial as we go on. But so robotic or human? I asked it before, and I don't think we quite got there. And it's a little bit testy in this atmosphere with all the excitement around human exploration. I understand. I'll answer as well, but
¿Por qué no los dos?
Yeah. There we go. Totally fair. Do you think there's
benefits to both? And I don't like. Yes, it ultimately comes down to funding, but I think there should be a mix of both. I know that's not the controversial answer you wanted, but that's the answer I like.
Yeah, totally fair. What about you, Becki?
I was also going to say both. Well, the thing that I see, I think robots can do a lot of the things that humans can do, like probably 90% of them in terms of gathering, and a lot of things we can't do in terms of exploring these foreign, I mean, the amount of exploration we've managed to do with robots and orbiters and various things of Mars is absolutely amazing. But at the same point, without humans in it, people lose interest.
Yeah.
That's like what's happened. We do so many incredible space exploration things right now. I mean, like, gosh, I am so excited about so many missions coming up, and most people have no idea any of them exist because they don't involve humans.
Exactly. And also, humans, let's not forget the added benefit of all the medical research we get from that. All the fun spin-offs and like spillover that you get from just a launch. I mean, from the Apollo era, we got so much technology that we now use in hospitals.
Yeah.
And so it's like, why not both? Like, there's a lot of benefits to both, and it's a lot of excitement to both. And so
Absolutely.
I like both.
couldn't agree more. And man, is Oppie cute. I just have to say it. I was sad to see it go, but I love seeing those little guys running all over the face of Mars. But I would like to see humans sooner rather than later. What? Yeah, exactly. Oh my gosh, can you imagine a human going out to see one of our rovers? That would. My heart is breaking just thinking about it. I absolutely love it.
Like a little informational placard.
Oh,
yeah, exactly.
This was the Spirit rover.
Yeah, give it a little medal. Like, give it the medal that Chewbacca didn't actually get at the end. Yep, exactly. So, like, great job, buddy. Oh man, that would just be incredible. So we're rapidly approaching human spaceflight to the moon. That's kind of the intention of Moon to Mars, Artemis Generation. What are you thinking has to happen from an infrastructure standpoint? What's the data saying, and how is policy being formed around this? We'll start with you, Becki.
Yeah, I think the really fundamental thing that needs to happen is we need to first of all, we need to settle on what rocket we're going to use, because there's been quite a bit of all over the place about that. Most notably because and this was a big thing leading up to this commercial crew demonstration, is that they made SpaceX halt all iterations of their design, because I guess every single Falcon 9 was just a little bit different than the previous
Oh
one.
yeah.
And so like,
Yeah.
I think a lot of our space industry has become very specific like that. And frankly, we need to get to a point that we like have a set way of doing it. You know, we have the vehicle that we use, we have the systems that we use, we've tested them 5 bajillion times. I mean, in the same way that like, the reason we are so successful with maintaining the ISS is because we really took the time to like get it right before we started, I think, populating it by and large. And so it really comes down to, I think, having good infrastructure as far as launches.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Karina?
For my side, I think it's ultimately going to take a lot of public-private participation, a lot of that collaboration. It's not the Apollo era. We can't do it. The government can't do it alone, and it's going to have to be this working back and forward and, you know, just setting up that infrastructure of working together and understanding each other. And I think that's the real way that you'll get the policy to move forward within this, is to have the industry and government work really well together, which they have worked very well together in the past, and they continue to do so. It's just like, to get this, it's a huge endeavor, and they're just going to have to like sit in, I would say, like, to put it simply, sit in a room and just be like, okay, how are we doing this? How do we agree on this?
Yeah,
how do
absolutely.
we collapse?
Yeah, and I mean, between COTS and CCTCAP, I hope I got that right. But you know, these commercial partnerships have proven to be not only efficient but very successful. I couldn't agree more that it's going to take both. Whether we need a reason to go and kind of explore the universe and put feet on the moon and Mars. And that impetus comes from the government, and then hopefully economy can be stimulated around that with commercial partners. I couldn't agree more. What about Moon to Mars? Have you historically been more like, oh, we just got to get to Mars, direct flight, let's go, or do you like the iterative approach that we're taking? I guess not iterative, but you know, the stop along the way approach. Yeah.
I would say, I personally, for me, as long as we get there.
That's what counts.
It's like, whatever we decide to agree on, if we agree on it, let's go for it.
Yeah, totally fair.
I
totally fair.
would personally say that I think we definitely need to go to the moon first. Whether or not we ultimately use that as our hop skip to Mars, I'm not sure. But I do think it's important that we get to the moon, and it has to do with that same thing I was getting at with like reliability. We just need to reliably be able to do that, because there's this notion of like, we did it in the 60s, we know how to do it. But like, if you really read,
Yeah.
oh my gosh. I mean, it was like such a statistical improbability that we succeeded. There were so many like slapdash whatevers all over the place that like, to say we know how to do it, like there's a reason that like we haven't done it in a really long time, and it's because we like barely did it the first time.
Exactly.
So we need to really know that before we try and go as far as Mars. I'm
very much on the same page. I want to see humans on Mars, absolutely. You know, preferably first woman on the moon here shortly. Shortly in space years, you know, that's fairly relative. And I think, you know, getting to the moon, kind of mastering that, actually having a sustainable development on the moon is the way to go about it as well. How would you actually imagine a moon base or Mars base manifesting itself? Do you think there's, you know, there are a lot of people talking about harvesting energy from the moon, you know, water ice or ice water ice, just ice on the lunar poles and everything. What do you envision when you think of the first moon base? And you're the sci-fi. You have the sci-fi background, Karina. So if you don't have an answer now, I want you to, like, I'm expecting
grandiose things.
I
was going to say, I can't imagine anything other than the ISS sort of like resupply route right now. It's hard to imagine what sort of real sustainable infrastructure we could like mine from space. It's just, I mean, all the space mining like idea itself is kind of, as far as I understand it, it's still in its like infancy in terms of like proving its like viability and helium-3. Yeah.
But I feel like we need a helium-3 reactor to mine the helium-3 first. Is kind of where I'm with you. I'm having a hard
Chicken and the
time.
egg.
Well, yeah, and to be able to utilize it, but I love the idea of mining ice and getting all the resources that we can from that. I think it's a difficult, interesting problem to be able to dive down into those. What are you envisioning, Karina?
I mean, like Becki said, it's kind of hard to move away from the ISS because like it's a proven kind of concept, and it's something that I think it will be needed. You need that reusability, and you need that. But you also have a lot of startups and new tech and new stuff that we can't really account for it yet because we don't know what they're going to creating. Maybe they're going to create something we can't even think of right now, something that is very sci-fi to help us. So we'll see as things transition, but I never underestimate those startups that are coming out with new technology. And also there's so like NASA also helps like startups and figure it out with their NASA iTech competitions, and ESA, the European Space Agency, they have like startup incubators and all these things. So we might also get other technology there that will get us to a more sci-fi station.
Yeah, absolutely. And somebody's asking about your sci-fi background. I'm not sure. Not sure about that, but I will power on. Do you think, or if you care to touch on that?
I just used to do a lot of science fiction conventions, a lot of panels at those conventions, a lot of talking about science and science fiction and how do we move forward. The last panel I had on that was at South by Southwest on that fun stuff. So I just love sci-fi, and it happens to mix with my day-to-day work, and I couldn't be happier with that.
So on the spot and slightly unrelated, but sort of, what are your favorite sci-fi, or are both of you into sci-fi? I know you are, Karina. Becki, are you a sci-fi person?
How could you be in this industry and not have at least like one series that you're like, no, this is the most precious thing to me, and you cannot criticize it in any way? So.
Yep, absolutely. What is your one series?
Firefly.
Oh yeah. Oh man.
It's exciting, and then I feel bad.
Yeah, exactly. I unfortunately watched Serenity before watching Firefly, which was obviously a mistake, and this was I think about 10 years ago while I was still in the military. It's Firefly is mainstay, and absolutely do Firefly is the right answer according to Justin.
Yeah.
Karina, with your sci-fi expertise, what's your poison?
I have to go with Star Trek. Because it's all about exploration and just finding new stuff, and very
like which one?
Okay, the Next Gen, because that's what I was introduced to first.
Yeah.
And it's just, and also you have a lot of people in the bridge that it's very diverse, and you have like people from different backgrounds, and it's just a lot of fun, and that's what you want to see from space.
Yeah.
You want to just
unpopular. Yeah, absolutely. Peace in space, and peaceful utilization of outer space, and
exactly.
Yeah.
And and peaceful exploration. Just knowing how to interact with whatever you find next. So that's always been a lot of fun for me, and also the fact that it's all about a little bit about diplomacy and how to talk with each other and solving those issues before getting any sort of violence or anything like that. So very much about Star Trek.
This might be a wildly unpopular opinion, but the Ferengi episodes are always my favorite. I just think they're the greatest. I don't know what it is, but well, I might not. Do we have more Star Trek fans out there? I am currently reading The Expanse, and it is quickly becoming my go-to. By absolutely, I mean, I just think the actual timeline of it, that we're actually living and working in space in the asteroid belt on Mars, and all of the political games that go along with that is just fascinating to me. I had a hard time with the show, to be completely honest, initially, but the books have just blown me away. So I'm on the third, really excited. Would highly suggest. Do you think any of these? So you have Asimov and others that sort of predicted where we are and contributed significantly to scientific thought for space exploration. And a lot of their, I forgot who it was, but somebody said, a rocket should land on a tail of flame like God intended, and we're seeing that now.
Yeah.
It's, what is there anything that you've read or seen or watched, and you're like, yes, I can actually see us doing that? This impossible thing feels like it's getting closer. Or anything that you would particularly like to see from these?
I mean, we're getting close to a replicator with 3D printing, but
Oh yeah.
which, I mean, someone who doesn't like, yes, I like cooking, but I hate the time it takes.
Yeah.
Love that replicator.
Totally fair. Totally fair. What about you, Becki? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, and I was going to say, and something that it's pretty close, it's if you watch Clone Wars when they're having their Senate meetings and like funding of the clones and everything, like, oh, this looks familiar.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's just like, ultimately, space is going to, like, you have to fund it. So you're going to have this conversation. So,
yeah, absolutely. I'm fascinated by sci-fi politics, so maybe that's a different conversation entirely, but I would love to have that panel at some point. What about you, Becki?
Gosh, my answer is going to be a little bit wishy-washy, which is that both, I think, Star Trek and Firefly paint a world where there's like a lot more meshing of cultures and peoples of different types, and I mean races and species and everything like that. And I think we're getting much closer to that as a planet, and I think things like our ability to communicate digitally to anyone at any point on any place in the globe is making a lot of, I mean, like the little holograms in Star Wars, we're fairly close to that sort of like broad diversity that the space industry and the future of space necessitates.
Also, on that note, I think just in general, diversity of like thought and ideas is what will get us to move forward in just any sort of innovation. And you can even see that in sci-fi when you see Afrofuturist sci-fi or anything like that, or Hispanic futurism, you see a different approach to how science will be taken. And it's usually a more positive approach than what traditional Western sci-fi is. That I would recommend seeing, looking a little bit into that, because you start to see how you can take some of the principles of science and then move it into a more positive outlook for the future. So just an FYI.
Yeah, very cool. Very, very cool. Yeah, I think mine's just focused on instantaneous food and whatever I can actually get, a la Red Dwarf. If anybody has ever watched or enjoys a Red Dwarf, which is like one of my favorite sci-fi series. Totally goofy, gets super dark sometimes. It's perfect. Yeah, so not nearly as deep or meaningful, but but if you know me, I like food. So we've got quite a few questions here that I have not been looking at, but for everyone, we have one from Tapaswini in India. How do you decide or plan missions? Do you choose something that is similar to what NASA is doing, or Do you decide to explore some place that you're curious about? Or do you look at current available resources and decide? This is sort of addressing the decadal, right? The decadal survey and how we actually decide where to go and when to go.
Oh,
Is that?
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
see, for me, this is an interesting question because for me, it's always the advocating after the fact of missions being picked. So.
Oh yeah, that's totally fair. Totally fair. But
Yeah, what I
Becki,
kind of
do you
settle
have-
on is that I'm not the expert in so many things related to space. That, you know, if the astrophysicist concluded that like this is going to be a really valuable moon for, like, I was researching one this morning. We're going to an asteroid called Psyche in like 2026, and like
My
I
old boss.
no idea why we would pick that one.
Yeah.
But I trust that whoever did really has a great reason for it.
Yep, that is Dr. Lindy Elkins Stanton at Arizona Space University. Might
Oh,
as
there you
well. We
go.
have 16 NASA missions. ASU, Arizona State University. We have some other Sun Devils on here. Anyway, I got to rep. But yeah, Psyche is a super fascinating planet because it's essentially the core, what we think is the core of a planet. So it's
Yeah.
an entirely nickel core of a planet that was either stripped away by impact, like very large impact, or some other process that I'm not even mildly qualified to identify. But yeah, I'm glad you brought up Psyche because it's a really cool mission, and Dr. Elkins Stanton is a phenomenal scientist that actually had a really cool fast. You were speaking about range earlier, Karina, and plethora of experiences, and you know, she's very much that person, and I have a lot of respect for her for kind of going into the business world and then coming back to space and doing all these incredible things. But yeah, selecting something out of all of the objects in space to say that one is a almost mind-bogglingly large task. I couldn't agree more. I'm just watching some of the apparently there's some controversy over how decadal is pronounced and pronounced rather, and yeah, so back to questions. I think I'm saying it right, but I might be wrong. This is from Jacob. I'm curious to hear whether you all are trying to engage the younger generation, tomorrow's scientists and astronauts, in space, and if so, in what way?
I'll take that one for my day job. We do a lot of that. So we have our Workforce Policy Council, who is usually the CHROs, the Chief HR Officers, Human Resources Officers, that we bring together to figure out what we can do to engage that young generation. And we have a couple of different things. One, we run a huge rocketry challenge, the world's largest rocketry challenge for grades 6 through 12. And we have them compete, and then the winner, we send them to compete internationally, and it's a lot of fun because you see all these young kids just super ready to launch rockets, and it's so exciting. And right now, because of COVID, we kind of got a little thrown off. We couldn't host our finals, but actually on Monday we'll be having a webinar where we'll give them awards for their engineering notebooks, for their marketing presentations, and I would recommend joining. They're so cool, and just seeing those videos and getting to see their engineering notebooks and everything they put into it, and you're just like, oh my god, I want to adopt you as your cool aunt. That's not really cool, but you like space, you think it's cool.
Your enthusiasm is
the
absolutely.
And right now, I'm personally working on a STEM calendar for the year 2021, for the school year, but more for the kiddies, for K through 5, introducing them to diverse people in the industry, and kind of highlighting different people throughout the year and giving some resources to teachers to kind of help them. And this is going to be mostly focused on Title I schools who don't usually get as much exposure and as much resources to join our industry. And we also had planned to give like a bunch of diverse books to students, but unfortunately COVID kind of threw that out the window. And now we're just going to work with our partner to First Book to send them books directly home with a feed and read program. Just kind of engage them and do this fun stuff. And if you like video games, I suggest that you keep an eye out for our rocket contest. It's literally just at Rocket Contest. You can find it on Twitter because we have some fun stuff that I can't talk about yet, but
very cool.
As you can tell, I'm very excited.
Your enthusiasm is absolutely infectious, I do have to say.
It's just little kids who love space.
Yeah, exactly. That's what everything's built on. Becki, Space Foundation has entire infrastructure set up for this purpose to a certain extent, right? Yeah.
So we actually just launched something that we call our Center for Innovation and Excellence. And it's basically kind of our umbrella for a lot of our different educational programs all across the country for all our different age groups. So we have obviously our Discovery Center here in Colorado Springs, Colorado, our little museum, which is darling, full of little interactive activities. And we have Science on a Sphere, which is a giant like interactive 3D globe we can project planets onto. Lots of things like that.
Thank you for the plug.
We go to schools all across the country and even across the world, and not only like provide programming for the students to enthuse them about space, but also teach the teachers how to teach about space. We have a whole teacher liaison program that we fund.
That's awesome.
And award teachers all across the country for their commitment to STEM education. We produce STEM materials, and lately we've done a bajillion webinars. I can't keep track of how many educational webinars we have done, but it is a lot.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
The last thing I would say to this effect is that I would say that a lot of the research we do kind of serves the same end, and that we talk a lot about like the STEM workforce and sort of the shortages in the STEM workforce and sort of the opportunities in various areas of the STEM world for people, and like the ways in which people attain that sort of expertise and end up in the space industry. Those are things that we study, and so we can provide more concrete information of like how those paths start to happen.
That is super cool. That is so important, and one of the biggest things that I'm passionate about as well. At all levels, we've got it seems like everybody has a story about how they either played with Estes rockets when they were younger, or had some type of engagement when they were younger, and might have diverged or gone in some other direction for a little while, but then rejoined the space industry and distinctly remember, looking through a telescope at the moon or something along those lines, or these programs that you all create. And so it works, and it's really great to see when it works and that it works. This one is specifically to Becki from, I believe, Zoe. Did you feel like you had to get space on your resume to be a senior data analyst, or how did this come about?
So I did not find that I actually needed space to get on my resume. The thing about the space industry is that I think your passion for it is more important than, what your official documents say per se. And that really all I had was computer science expertise. And so when they interviewed me for this job, I was like, data, I can probably do data. The reason they actually hired me, they told me, was because even though I had no idea what I was talking about, they just gave me a data set about the NASA budget and said, play with this. And I guess I asked a lot of questions. And just the fact that I wanted to understand what was going on is really what they saw and latched onto. And so really, provided you have one of these strong sets of, either a great understanding of policy or a great understanding of computers or data analysis or any of those sorts of things, there's so many. I mean, even somebody like Ron, whose expertise is like media. I mean, there's a beautiful niche for Ron. I mean, Ron's niche is much too big for a single Ron.
I think Ron is the niche right now.
Yeah.
That's what the amount of content that he's putting out there. It's overwhelming. I need to up my game.
Thank you. So I'll be here next week too. No, I'm just kidding.
Do I get to mute you? No. Okay, cool. He did it himself. Just kidding.
Yeah, absolutely. If you just kind of set your sights on it, and the thing I will say is that it's not fast.
Yeah. Yep.
That's been
totally
a
fair.
lesson.
There's the reason
certainly.
John said spacers.
Well,
Yeah, but if you set your sights on it
yeah, exactly.
and keep trying and keep expressing your enthusiasm for it, and like Karina said, write those powerful cover letters, and people will listen.
It is amazing where passionate kind of, not please, but passion just period will get you in just about any industry. But actually being sincerely and overtly passionate about what you want to do, and the willingness to learn and drive to get through that is incredible. Which it sounds like that happened with you, Karina, and when I ended up working at Spire for an internship, Spire Global, I think that was the thing that actually did it, was just, I need to do this in my cover letter and enumerating the ways. So I think I'm just going to throw out a little piece of advice, because there are a lot of questions about how to get into the space industry, is don't kind of censor yourself with that passion for what you want to do. Maybe tune it a little bit, but show people that you're interested and that you will have the drive to learn what you need to learn to do the job. And they're usually either willing to talk to you or teach you through it the majority of the time. Speaking of which, there was a request if any of us would be willing to chat with a 17-year-old from India who wants to work in the space industry. I feel like I know the answer to this.
Yeah,
but yes, they're absolutely. I think all of us would be more than willing to do that. So we'll try to figure out.
And I'm so sorry to bust in here. It's like, this is my dear, sweet heart of a student, Tapa Swinney, who's joined almost everything that Explore Mars has done. So if you guys will email me at janet@janetsplanet.com, I will connect you. I'm just telling you, I met her when she was 12, and it makes me cry a bit. I have full confidence she is going to win a Nobel Prize one day. So if you guys would jump in and also be willing to guide her steps, I would be most grateful.
Absolutely. I have chills right now. Thank you so much for jumping in. I didn't realize.
And I think on that note, John, never be afraid to reach out to people, even if you don't know them. LinkedIn and Twitter are your best friend. Space Twitter is one of the most friendly Twitter communities you can find. And just don't be afraid to reach out. Reach out with your questions, like set up some coffees or digital coffees now, some phone calls. Just ask questions and ask about how they got where they got, and maybe they'll give you some ideas or some hints, or even introduce you to other people in the industry. Just don't be afraid to do that outreach to people, because most of the time, like, they're willing to talk to you because somebody talked to them.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I was able to get in. And it doesn't need to be a mentor or a senior figure whatsoever. The people that got me into space were other SED students that just spoke a really great game, showed me a really cool video about space, and I was like, yep, I'm in, let's do this. and were incredibly welcoming and became a family to me. I've the utmost respect for everybody on this call, and I'm sure I've definitely already learned something from you. So I think peer mentorship or things of that nature are underrepresented as well. Back to a few questions and less of my rambling. Let's see the question from Tapa Swinney. Many people are getting involved in space, with many new companies focusing on space exploration. Could this lead to the overuse of current available resources? And what's the temperature here?
Will you read that one more time for me to process?
Absolutely. Many people are getting involved in space, with many new companies focusing on space exploration. Could this lead to overuse of the currently available resources? So let's bound this a little bit with yeah. So let's say initially, are we expediting the, how do I not say this in an overly dramatic way? The heat death of the universe. No, the are we using too many rare resources from Earth to facilitate all of this?
Becki, is there any data?
You know, the trick about it,
saw that bus fly by.
I mean, fundamentally, and like this is kind of almost a personal philosophy broadly external to space, is that I think a lot of our rhetoric around like, are we going to run out of water, food, or whatever resources, like there are some concrete things that we are running low on, but I think human ingenuity will fill that void. Many times over, we've run out of things, you know, or found that some sort of, you know, the aerosols we were using were unsustainable, and so we switched to other things. And the trick is whether we can get everyone collectively to understand, you know, the sort of issues we're having and get on board. But I do think that it's hard to imagine that we would run out of a resource, shrug, and say, I guess space is over.
Yeah,
you know, we will continue to persevere. And a lot of those ideas of like the finite resources that are depleting completely take away the fact that we have innovated and will continue to innovate.
Well, and I think on that note too, the fact that just space in general brings in a lot of technology that we can use for those resources. Water filtration, air filtration, you know, new ways of agriculture. You know, there's a lot that's space exploration can bring to help us here, because ultimately you're supporting life somewhere else, and those same concepts translate to supporting life on Earth.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's that. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No.
Okay, that is the perfect segue into, we got to know this question's coming from Matthew Williams. Shouldn't we fix Earth first?
My argument is that space is part of fixing Earth.
Yeah, I think.
I mean, I don't think those things are inextricably linked. I mean, you think about the number of things we've managed to accomplish because of our use of space. Like, I mean, how many lives have been saved by like environmental monitoring or like agricultural optimization because of, and that's literally just Earth observation. You know, not to say anything about what we've accomplished with GPS or, you know, positioning, navigation, timing broadly or anything else like that. I mean, the great things that are moving humanity forward are in large ways tied to space. And so fixing humanity involves using space.
John, just a quick note. Matthew is asking that you say the entire question because he's not asking that. People are asking this question of him.
Oh,
I was gonna get to that, so I don't get sued for defamation. But so it's in quotes. It says, "Shouldn't we fix Earth first? How often do you get asked those questions, and how do you answer that?" So he was not asking this question per se.
I get asked that a lot on social media.
Yeah. Oh yeah. A lot.
I get asked that a lot from friends who don't know the space industry. Just in general, like, why not fix Earth first? And it's like, well, even Earth observation and analysis of air particles and during the shuttle programs told us that there was a hole in the ozone layer.
Yep. And exploring Venus told us about global warming, which is the next great catastrophe. You know, it's fairly important to understand. One of my favorite stories about how Earth helps. It's kind of topical, but how Earth helps or space helps Earth is I used to work with somebody that said, you know, I don't really care about space, so I'm kind of just here for the job itself. I was like, didn't you meet your husband on Twitter? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, GPS, geolocation. It's the only way it wouldn't have worked.
Tinder.
And what? Yeah.
Like Tinder, you like space.
Exactly. It's always just one of my favorite favorite kind of anecdotes. So more questions. From Mark Latham. Hey, Mark. Does planetary protection conflict with the human drive to explore or settle?
don't think so.
I think part
Yeah,
of protecting is understanding
Yep.
what's out there, right? Like you send out a scout in a battle. Not that we're in a
Yeah.
space battle, but
yeah,
I mean, like, you even have that mission from APL where they're launching, they're going to hit a asteroid to see if they can move it, because ultimately, like, but that's also part of exploration and Earth,
Yep.
your protection. It doesn't
I
have to,
do.
I don't think concepts have to necessarily be against each other it's more about the use of the technology and the use of whatever you're developing.
yeah.
I do
I would
definitely
agree.
understand what you're getting at with that question, though, and that I do think there kind of are two sectors in the space community. One that is very focused on the Earth defense sort of national security side, and then there's kind of a separate sector of the space community that I think is really focused on the sort of exploration side. So it does sometimes seem to be, I think, a bit of headbutting between those communities, and I've noticed that in my research.
Yeah. And for from the planetary protection standpoint, just contaminating, I think it's just a matter of being good stewards as we explore. I don't think they're necessarily in conflict to protect a planet from contamination necessarily. I just think it's
Gotcha.
a matter of being. So they had one both ways on that one. But,
Well, I think that's why you like the Star Trek model, because, well, that's why I like the Star Trek model.
Yeah.
You think about the planets and you think about what's there before you interact with it.
Yeah, exactly.
But I totally get where you were going, Becki, with the defense space and civil space.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Becki, question for you. I don't know who from, but what's your favorite mission coming up?
My favorite mission is the James Webb Space Telescope.
Yeah.
It's delayed. I have this whole list in front of me that's like everything that's been halted or postponed in response to COVID. And it's like totally crushing. But I'm excited of the James Webb Space Telescope because like you think about how much inspiration the public has drawn from like the things that have come from Hubble.
Yeah.
I mean, like I know so many people who are not even space people who have like Hubble backgrounds on their computer. I mean, it's just like it has captured the public imagination. And when you think about like its orbital parameters and its orbital path, it's actually only in a place that it can look into outer space for half of the time. And it's in low Earth orbit, so it's moving fast, behind the Earth, every 45 minutes at a time that it gets to focus on a part of deep space. So like you can only do so much as you're, rapidly, your little window of opportunity is so small. And so James Webb, as I'm sure many people here know, but just to make sure that everybody's on the same page, is going to be in a Lagrangian point, which basically means that it is relatively stagnant to the Earth based on like the gravitation. I'm not an astrophysicist, but based on the gravitational pulls of the sun and the Earth and all that sort of thing. And so it will be in a position to look at deep space all the time. It can just do that.
Gigantic too.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not talking about a backyard telescope or even a Dobsonian. We're talking about the size of a building, right?
And with modern like hardware capabilities, I mean, Hubble has what, like 512 kilobytes? I mean, it's some sort like inconceivably tiny. Like you could buy all of the memory on Hubble at Walgreens for $10. Like, and we're gonna put something up with like that proper capability and modern capability. I'm so stoked. Anyway.
Yeah, we get to see into the past essentially, right? I mean, pretty significantly. Yeah.
I hope it continues to happen.
Oh
yeah, let's
not go there. Anyway,
so we share that mission. As some of the space community know, we have Space Prom or the Goddard Dinner, but we know it as Space Prom. I literally bought a dress because it looked like it had like the James Webb Telescope glitter.
Nice. That is awesome.
I was sitting at a table with the company, that's working on it, and I was like, "Give me your telescope."
That seems so appropriate from what I know of you, Karina. That's excellent. I love it. What does everyone think of ULA, United Launch Alliance's goals to have 1,000 people living and working in space within 30 years? What would that entail, and is it sustainable?
Gosh, it's hard to say, because with our current capabilities, obviously that's not, I mean, we're still figuring out if we can launch people from US soil to the ISS. I mean, so like clearly where we are right now, that's not feasible. But I mean, you think about how much innovation has happened, and it goes back to that like private commercial, or the commercial government, you know, collaboration. We've seen so much innovation in the last just decade. When you look at the way the US government and SpaceX have worked together, or the US government and ULA have worked together, or now, you know, Boeing with the Starliner, everything with that. There's just been leaps and leaps and bounds in our abilities to do things like, you know, the reusability of rockets, or pneumatic payload fairings, like so many pieces of innovation that just came from that. Who knows what 20 years will bring, 30 years will bring.
Yeah. For work, we worked on a study on what the industry and the world would look like in the next 30 years. But, and you know, we have a lot of different things being very much public and very much used by others, and some that are niche. But ultimately, we have the thing of, we don't know if there's going to be a big switch in technology where you're just going to leap. You're just going to go far beyond what we think of right now. And so, you know, but it's always good to ultimately keep those big ideas.
Yeah.
Because you have something to keep pushing you forward.
Absolutely. And I mean, those kinds of aggressive goals are what have gotten us to where we are currently with regularly landing us, you know what I mean? But regularly landing entire, I think they're 14-story tall rockets, you know, which nobody had seen or really thought about before. So this we're over time, but was very engaged with all the questions. So thank you to everybody that's tuned into this. I'm going to turn it over to Ron, and thank you, Becki and Karina, for joining me. This was phenomenal, and I look forward to our Politics of Sci-Fi panel sometime in the near future. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Ron, Chris, and Jake.
Ron.
Oh, just gonna put it on me, huh? I see how it is. We'll see.
We heard you, John.
Really want to thank all three of our panelists today, if I can speak, John Conafay, Becki Yukman, and Karina Perez, for coming on and discussing every single possible topic. And this is the reason that their voices matter so much, is that there's just so much to talk about with everything that we're working on right now. So thank you to the three of you for joining us today. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you so
It was a
much.
blast.
And we do want to remind everybody that if you would like to donate, do please check out our website at ExploreMars.org, and you're going to be able to find more details there. And also look at the website and our social media pages to find out details on all of our upcoming panels, as well as our Drinks with Explore Mars events that we have. We're going to take next week off, but we will see you all the following week. So we hope everybody enjoyed it, and we will see everybody soon.
But before we go,
Yes.
Want to keep that, what we mentioned earlier, open, of the, if you want to reach out to us, reach out to us.
Absolutely.
I think LinkedIn with our names, or like for me on social, it's just Karina in Space. On anything, just find me.
Yep. At J Conafay or Jonafay on Twitter.
At B Yukman. Easy enough.
Yeah.